Comrade Prince said that I go around the country electrifying students and young people, other young people. It's just the opposite. I go around the country in order to be electrified by student organizations and the young people. And this is really true, just not a rhetoric. I was in Hyderabad and 5 student organizations did a dharna demonstration on WTO GATS issue. I participated, and at the end of it, one undergraduate student of Osmania University approached me and said, I have a problem with this WTO. I said, what is your problem? He said, it should not be called World Trade Organization, because it is not a World Trade Organization. What should it be called? I asked him. It should be called Western Capitalist Trade Organization. He says, all what you told me is Western Capitalist Trade Organization. I said, what about Japan? He said, that I do not know. So you see, young people are thinking. They are thinking. Another student approached me and said that we have, in that meeting, they passed a resolution in support, I hope this will be done here also, in support of the students in Delhi agitating against MHRD's decision to scrap scholarships, the non-net UGC scholarships. It is now already probably in 10th or 12th day. It is continuing. And initially they called it Occupy UGC. And when they were bundled out with lathi charge by police and taken to police station, then they came back again and called it Reoccupy UGC. So this another student approaches me, said, are you sure this is a correct use of the phrase Occupy UGC in our country? I said, why do you think it's not a correct usage? He said, because it was coined by American students and youth when they said Occupy Wall Street. But what I have read about it shows me they never understood the nature of capitalism, and they did it only out of enthusiasm without understanding. But I think our student organization understand capitalism, and so they are different. They should not be using the same term. It confuses us. See, people are thinking, young people are thinking. There's a great hope in this country. We can stop WTO GATS even now. Despite the fact when All India Forum for Right to Education took its decision to rebuild the campaign, because we have been doing it for many years, to rebuild the campaign in an intensified manner before the Nairobi conference takes place on 15th of December. And Comrade Prince was there, Comrade Kanaka Sundaramji was there. And one of our very senior intellectuals, he got up and said, I don't understand why are we taking this decision to build this campaign. Because after all, WTO GATS is a default position of capitalism. It's going to happen. Nobody can stop it. But now after 4 or 5 months of the sustained campaign, I think even that comrade will not say this, because now there's a hope we can stop it. And I'll come back to it, why there's a hope that despite default mechanism of the capitalism, we can still stop it. I will share a story, A, to connect with you all, but B, it will probably give a context in which I am speaking. As you all know by now, that our higher education was offered formally to WTO GATS in the year of 2005. But my story is of 1998, when there was no talk of offering higher education to WTO GATS. I was then appointed as the Dean of Faculty of Education at Delhi University, a very new task for me. I was quite unprepared. And within a few days of taking charge, I got a phone call by someone on behalf of the Western Australian University delegation visiting India and seeking an appointment with the Dean of Faculty of Education. So I agreed. The 3-member delegation reached my office with a proposal. What was the proposal? The proposal was that we propose to you that henceforth you should stop giving your degrees in education, whether it's B.Ed, M.Ed, M.Phil, PhD, or the very high-profile new course for elementary teachers called Bachelor of Elementary Education. They knew about all this. and you should stop giving it. Instead, you should agree to award Western Australian university degrees. So it's quite unprepared for such a proposal. So I asked, why this proposal? Why should we even think about it? We have a very established program of education in our department. Why should we even think about it? So it's because this will bring you lots of money. The kind of money which your department has never seen. That kind of money. Because your students will be willing to pay very high fees, a lot of high fees, because it carries a label of Western Australian University, and your students are liable to accept this, that they should pay high fees. And when they pay high fees, a part of it will of course go to Western Australian University as a profit, and that's the first time I heard the word profit in relating to education in my life. I knew that something big is going to happen in this country, that this delegation can come and openly propose this, go around the whole country. And then they went on to say that another substantial part will be given to you as salaries. In addition to what you are getting from your government, salaries will come to you, so your salary will go up manyfold. And then a smaller part will be invested in improving your very poor infrastructure of your department. We have seen, we have taken a round before coming to your office, we know how horrible are your toilets, your classrooms are not equipped with computer facilities. All that will be done, your physics lab, chemistry lab, biology lab, psychology lab, everything will be rejuvenated with most modern gadgetry. So I did not know how to deal with it. I had to be polite, so I asked him, do you know about the ideas of education which Gandhi proposed, or based upon productive work? This is who? Mr. Gandhi you are talking about? I said, yes. He said, he was a political leader. What does he have to do with education? I said, thank you. I got my reply. Then I said, have you ever heard of Rabindranath Tagore's ideas on education? That they knew. They said, oh, you're Nobel laureate in literature. I said, yes. What does he have to do with education? He said, thank you. I got my reply. And then I asked, have you ever heard of Dr. Ambedkar's ideas on education? And he said, who? Who? And they did not know the name Ambedkar. I said, I got my response. Thank you. And this is precisely why, not because we do not want your money, we don't want profits in education. This is precisely why we should not ever even discuss the idea of giving you degrees. But this is what you will do, because you don't understand our educational history, or what we want to do, our aspirations, what kind of India we want to build. But they won't leave my office. And one of them said, you look like a frog in a well, who is not interested in international thoughts, international knowledge. You just want to live in a small little department and not even look outside. So I said, no, that is not true. You will be happy to know that in our courses, we teach about the Australian policies vis-a-vis your Maoris. And then they were quite nonplussed. I said, how do you know about our Maoris? It's because we have Dalits and tribals who have been exploited, oppressed for centuries, and we are very much interested in knowing how to remove this long gap of 5,000 years of discrimination and oppression. And since you have also exploited your Maoris, you have totally taken away their land and dehumanized them. So we want to know how your government is trying to engage with giving the proper education and then therefore equal status in a society. And therefore we analyze your policies and analyze our government's policies and compare them. Then they were ready to leave. And they left. The point is, the formal preparations of government in any policy, not just the policy of handing over higher education to WTO cash, any policy begins long before it is actually announced. Long before. And if we learn how to catch on to these indications, they may look only indications. If we learn how to analyze those indications, we'll be better prepared to resist the onslaught of those policies, which is bound to come later on. And I think the kind of intense and deep analysis which you heard from Professor Ramanujan today on the new education policy. It's not even a draft. It's only a set of questionnaires. But if you relate it with what has been happening for last 15 years or 25 years since globalization, increasing neoliberal assault on our education system and all aspects of our national life, if you study and keep analyzing them, then you would know exactly what each question in the school education sector or another one in higher education sector, as he was analyzing, each question has a deep meaning. It is not a mechanical design of the questionnaire. It's a well-considered design with an insight into how to convince the public in India that what the government has planned to do must be agreed upon, and there will be, it's like Chomsky what he says, you are basically constructing a consensus. You're constructing opinion through the questionnaire. The government is way ahead of us. They have far more information about what they want to do, and I'm sure this drama which is happening through so-called consultation is really a drama, because the full policy document written by either Mr. Dinanath Batra or somebody else in Sangh Parivar is just awaiting for parliamentary approval. So we have to now decide how to fight back for what is already ready. I want to go on. WTO GATS, you already heard Professor Mani on the history. I was able to follow good part of it. The issue which I want to emphasize, the history of this, is about the very coining of the term General Agreement on Trade in Services. We should all wonder, ask this question, all right, whatever agreement you may have under GATS, what does education have to do with it? Education is not a service in that market terminology. Education is a basic constitutional right. It's a democratic right of every citizen of India. It's an entitlement which flows out of our constitution, out of the entire 150 years of struggle against British imperialism. It's an aspiration of our freedom struggle. How can it be reduced to service, a tradable service for profit? If we do not question this conceptual attack on our education system brought in by the global capital, then we will not be able to fight the battle properly. A lot what is flowing out of accepting that education is a service, we can see even the whole skill formation agenda, skill development mission is a fallout of having accepted that education as a service. That education is not meant for social development, for building a democratic, secular, egalitarian society. It is just a tradable commodity like any other commodity. And we should not be surprised or upset that education is listed by GATS in this, along with nightclubs and beer pubs. In the same breath, GATS says education, health, nightclubs and pubs are all services. So if you really want to build a struggle, a resolute struggle to undo what has been happening to our education system since the formal announcement of globalization, which implies that preparation to attack our education system had begun before 1991 declaration of globalization. It began in 80s, and I don't have time today to describe how, what is the evidence that it had begun in 1980. The 86 policy itself is an outcome of the globalization agenda, preparation for that. Just like the new education policy questionnaire is a preparation for facilitating WTO GATS. Just like the scrapping of scholarships by MHRD, non-net UGC scholarship, is one step forward for enabling the WTO GATS to enter India in the area of higher education. So, therefore we have to resist the idea of this conceptual attack. We have to say in full solidarity, and I hope this message can go out from this seminar today, that the people present here in Tamil Nadu decided that education is not a service. It is a constitutional and democratic right of our people. But we are now talking in a trade language. And you won't be upset if I keep on sharing with you the trade discourse on education. All of the students and young people sitting here, even the children who are sitting there from schools, who are going to become students of colleges and university tomorrow, all of you are not students anymore. All of you are consumers, mere consumers. Consumers of a service called education. Who is going to provide this service to you for which you will pay the full cost? Not just WTO. World Bank decades ago wrote a document that was meant for school education. And that document said that all children are users of the educational service, and therefore they pay is market cost of known to be known as user charges. And WTO is carrying on with that language, that all students being consumers must pay the user charges like you pay in the market the cost of soap or oil. Who is going to provide this service? The educational institutions, the colleges, the universities, the polytechnics, the IITs, the IIMs, the Institute of Mathematical Science, the Indian Institute of Science, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. All these great institutions of India are going to be service providers. And what will be the Vice Chancellor called? Vice Chancellor will be the CEO of the corporation called Madras University. And if the Vice Chancellor does not ensure optimal profit out of the company called Madras University, then CEO will be dismissed by the board of directors. And what are the college teachers and university professors? They are merely employees of the company, whether college or university, and if you do not fulfill the agenda which CEO is asking you to do, then you will also be dismissed along with him or her. This is not something which we can laugh at. It's not a joke. It's a reality. Along the GATS means this is going to happen. When GATS entered the scene, when the old GATT, General Agreement of Trade and Tariffs, which was only concerned with industrial products, industrial goods, when that became GATT 1994 and WTO appeared on the scene, and WTO wanted to expand the market scope in every country, because only by expanding the scope of the market that the capitalism and capitalist crisis can be resolved and capitalism can survive. Therefore, more and more markets have to be included in global trading. And one of the very important ways was to convert, on one hand, various things like health, education, water, transport, electricity, and so on, and even cultural matters into services, and on the other hand, convert knowledge which can be patented. So two new platforms were created. One was General Agreement on Trades and Services, and another was TRIPS, Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights. So knowledge becomes patented. GATS has got several provisions. This is not the occasion when the entire GATS can be analyzed. But let me just touch upon those provisions which will explain to us why GATS is an alarming attack on our higher education system. I'll take the example of the provision which is called Most Favored Nation. Here I must stop and say that whenever there is a neoliberal capitalist attack on any aspect of our national life, the forces behind the attack coin very attractive, people-friendly terms. When they want to destroy school education, as they decided in 1990s, they called it education for all. After destroying it in 1990s, they wanted to legitimize it by bringing it into our policy fold. So when the design of 1990s under district primary education program was going to be incorporated into Indian policy framework, in 10th 5-year plan, it was called Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. And when that needed protection of the Constitution, then 86 Constitutional Amendment was passed to be called Right to Education Amendment. And under that amendment, by adding one more article after Article 21, 21A was added, and then it needed full-fledged constitutional protection. Otherwise, we will all stand up and say, what is the dilution and distortion of our school education and privatization and commercialization of school education? Therefore, in 2009, the state passed Right to Education Act, which meant right not to the children of India for procuring or accessing education of equitable quality, free of cost, state-funded, free of cost education, but it meant a right to the corporate houses to make profit out of school education. And therefore, after that act was instituted in 2009, more than 1.25 lakh schools have already been closed, and another lakh schools have been earmarked for being closed in this year, coming year. It is therefore that in the last 6-7 years, the rate at which privatization is taking place in school education has increased. And that was precisely the goal of Right to Education Act. The Right to Education Act has been fully implemented successfully, within quotation marks. This was the agenda of globalization. And now comes the turn of higher education. It was in the NDA government route, previous one, when Prime Minister Vajpayee was there, then the first signal was given that we are moving in the direction of GATS. It was 1999 when Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi, the then HRD minister, made a speech at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And in that speech he said, higher education has nothing to do with social benefit or social welfare or social development. Because higher education only benefits the individual student. Please listen to very carefully how the new concept is now being built. Higher education benefits only the student. And since it benefits only the student, it should not be seen as a public good or social good. It should be known as non-merit good. It has nothing to do with public, nothing to do with society. It only increases your value in the market to become an engineer or a doctor or a management specialist or IT specialist. It is only for your personal benefit. Therefore, extending the World Bank and WTO dictum, it says you must pay the cost, full cost, not partial, full. Within a year, Ambani Birla report was presented not to HRD ministry, but very importantly, significantly, to the Prime Minister's Economic Affairs Council. Signal is very clear. Where the report is going to Economic Affairs Council, not to any body of the HRD ministry. It was written by two of the greatest educationists of India, Mukesh Ambani and Kumar Mangalam Birla. The story doesn't end. If you look at the fine prints inside the cover of the Ambani Birla report, which I don't think anyone else cared to look at, in very fine print, it says it was written by a computer company located in your city, Chennai. The whole draft of Ambani Birla report actually was done here by a computer company. These are the signals of things to come in future. And there are three basic principles which I must share with you of Ambani Birla, which provide the groundwork for GATS agenda. It's being done by our own people, not by them. We are only preparing the groundwork for them, and then they'll come in full-fledged attack format. Ambani Birla report argued that education's goal is not social development, but to use education as a tool for profit in the market and developed market. Second, Ambani Birla report is telling the government, if you want, you can continue to provide public funds for school education, something which they will not say today. Because now school education open for total privatization. But at that time, it was the beginning of the process. Therefore, they said in 2000, if you want, you can continue to provide public funds for schools. But when it comes to secondary and senior secondary school, the report says you can, if you want, you can start reducing your public funding in secondary and senior secondary level, because market is ready to start coming in and participate in providing secondary and senior secondary education. Beautiful word, participate. Not that we are coming in to make profit. We are going to participate. And the third and most dangerous one is higher education need not provide even a penny. Higher education, we are ready. The market is ready to take over. In 2000. And when we take over, we'll also ensure that all branches of knowledge in which market is interested will be fully provided for as per market rules, and you can withdraw your public funding totally. It has very serious implications about knowledge. When Ambani Birla report came out, I wrote an article saying Ambani Birla report is not just an attack about accessibility, quality. It is an epistemological or epistemic attack on our education system. It is an attack on the very socio-political character of knowledge. And GATS is a pronounced form of epistemic attack. I hope to return to it later. Well, how is it an epistemic or knowledge attack? It's because when market takes over the teaching of sciences, social sciences and humanities, it will decide what to teach and what not to teach. How to teach, pedagogy will be decided. They will be the Paulo Freire, Professor Mani, not we. They will be the Paulo Freire. They will decide how to teach and whom to teach and whom not to teach. If India's Dalits, tribals, Muslims and OBCs, and particularly women in each section, because of patriarchal issues, cannot pay the market cost of education, then sorry, that's your misfortune. Nothing can be done, because social justice agenda has no place when GATS comes in. When market takes over, there is no place for social justice agenda. I hope to return to this also later. Imagine, why will market be interested in teaching the history of 1857 struggle, which gave us a historic lesson that Hindus and Muslims can fight shoulder to shoulder against British imperialism. It is not in their interest to accept solidarity of different communities, different religions, different sections of society. When they decide to fight, when the working class decides to fight with working class consciousness, that is very dangerous to capital. So this part of history will not be taught. Why will market be interested in teaching you the fact that Bhagat Singh was fighting not merely for transfer of power from the white-skinned rulers to black-skinned rulers? Bhagat Singh in fact was fighting for, and all his colleagues of Hindustan Socialist Republican Association were waging a struggle for a socialist reconstruction of Indian society, for a socialist revolution after independence. This fact also will not be shared. He will be reduced, and all his colleagues will be reduced to being merely patriots, like any other patriot. It's an attack on the whole vision of our historical consciousness, and therefore also I will extend to scientific consciousness. Why would it not be? Please think about it. Which market force will be interested that India's children are taught in such a way that they acquire critical thought, or the critical thought already existing in their minds before they came to school is further enriched and strengthened? Which market force will be interested in ensuring that children learn and internalize the ideas of history of science, of scientific temper, or historical consciousness, or accept the values of humanism? It's not just a question of being rational. Of course, if you are rational, you will be killed today. So all rationalists who think they are rational must be ready to protect themselves. If Kalburgi can lose his life, if Pansare can lose his life, if Dabolkar can lose his life, all of us sitting here who are striving to be rationalists will lose our lives. But that is another aspect where globalization, forces of globalization make an unholy alliance with the forces of communalism and fanaticism, and vice versa. So, there is no place for critical thought, no place for exploration, for asking questions, even less for disagreement and dissent, which are the qualities, or doubt. That I have a doubt about what my Prime Minister is saying, what my teacher is saying, what my Vice Chancellor is saying. There is no provision for doubt. If you don't fall in line, then your CEO or your Prime Minister will see to it that you fall in line. Things are no less alarming than what I am trying to share with you. I am not building it up, I am not exaggerating. So, the Mukesh Ambani and Kumar Mangalam Birla report has such implications, and this report has been implemented since then fully and successfully. This is why we are in a position to talk about reducing and substituting education by skill. Let me make this point here fully, because it will keep coming, and Professor Ramanujam also talked about it. We have nothing against making skill an integral organic part of education, where it belongs. Any education without the component of skill, I would argue, is incomplete, because along with the cognitive function of education, which enables us to think, to argue, to know the facts, to create knowledge, apart from this function, there is a very important function of education which is known as its affective domain. Value formation, emotions, empathy, they are very important functions of education. And the third important integral function is skill development. There is no problem with talking about skill and reducing, talking about we'll have now skill development mission. Then what is the problem? The problem is, unlike what Gandhi was saying in 1937 and the years that followed, that productive work, which necessarily involves skill, productive work should be an integral part of education system for all children of India, whether you are Dalits or tribals, or you are upper caste Brahmins or rich people. Doesn't matter who you are, independent India will have an education system where productive work will be a source of knowledge formation, value formation and skill development. Simultaneously, that is where the knowledge, values and skills will emerge from, by engaging the children of all castes and classes, and both sexes, gender and even more sexes which we now know and recognize. All children will engage with productive work, irrespective of their caste or class background. Very important formulation. So, it is not Gandhian idea of productive work which involves skill formation and value formation and knowledge formation. That is not what the market is concerned about. Market is concerned about creating a new neo-Brahminical caste system. And what is that? That is the market agenda. The agenda of the neoliberal capital, to create a neo-Brahminical caste system which can survive the movement of Phule, Ambedkar, Periyar. All those movements can be engaged with by this neo-Brahminical caste system. And this agenda is that start excluding masses of our children coming from the lower caste and lower classes, and particularly girls in each section, from school education. Exclude them and argue that they come from poor families, wage labor families, peasant families. Therefore, their parents are waiting for the children to earn some extra money for them. So, we should be in a hurry to help the poor parents. Not be in a hurry to eliminate poverty, not be in a hurry to eliminate discrimination and inequality from our society, but we should be in a hurry to exclude these children and give them some skill. And Professor Ramanujam has told us that they are already ready to substitute education just after class 8 with skills. Let me predict, this is only for the time being. Within a matter of 1 or 2 years, you will start hearing the government is now going to substitute education with skill training after class 5. For whom? Not for the rich people, upper classes, not for the upper caste, but for the vast masses of our country, which is comprised by Dalits, tribals, Muslims, OBCs, and also the disabled people who are also cannot properly gain knowledge because we don't provide them adequate facilities to gain knowledge. Therefore, they will also be pushed into the skill agenda. Already, the previous policy framework looks upon disabled education, education of the disabled as a skill training. It's already there. The existing schemes of the past is already there. That will be further enhanced. And then you create a mass of so-called semi-skilled labor, which will have access only to the low-earning skills, and this will be exported. Another export from India. Your Prime Minister has already announced, he's been announcing it even from the time of elections, last year's elections, during election, that India will be converted into the largest supplier of skilled workforce. The only one important concept he has been not referring to, and that is the largest, India will be largest supplier of skilled workforce, but that skilled workforce will have to be enslaved workforce. How can capitalism can afford to engage skilled labor, which is a thinking labor? A thinking person is the most dangerous person in the world. You know that, I forget the name of that European poet who wrote long ago, that I am not afraid of this huge machine, earth-moving machine, which is moving towards me. But I am afraid of the small, tiny person sitting on the steerings. Suppose that person begins to think, and then what will happen to me? How can a thinking worker be welcomed by market? Therefore, entire education has to undo independent thought, critical thought, analysis, exploration, dissent, disagreement, questions. All these are not going to be part of the education of the vast masses of our country. The entire education will be reduced to only accepting the market agenda. And therefore, now we are going to produce, will be the biggest supplier of skilled slave foot soldiers of the global market. It's a question of substituting education by skill which should bother us, not skill. Skill has always been part of education system. What is new being told is that now it will replace substitute education at all levels increasingly. And then access to institutions which can create knowledge, enable you to create knowledge or participate in creation of knowledge, that access will be limited to maybe to 5 to 10% of our people, all belonging necessarily to upper caste and upper class, because social justice agenda will be thrown out. There will be no scholarship, no fellowship, no stipend, no hostels, no other support measures which come out of social justice agenda. So naturally, even that small percentage of SCs, STs, OBCs, Muslims which are able to get ahead in higher education, even that small fraction will not exist anymore in that upper stratum of students who are allowed to go into real higher education. The scenario should be understood in my view. That's why we must oppose GATS. Friends, what else GATS will do? It has, as I was saying, a provision called most favored nation. Beautiful word. You would think, oh, it's going to favor India somehow. Most favored nation. Are we going to be among the list of most favored nation or not? We'll start wondering. But most favored nation say there are 161 members of WTO, maybe 30-40 countries, that number is not still known fully. 30-40 countries have offered a higher education to GATS. And the MFN provision says you will have no choice. It's a multilateral agreement. You cannot say we'll accept American investment, but we'll say no to South Africa or to Bangladesh. Then all nations which are offered a higher education to GATS all have equal right to invest in your country, or you have equal right to invest in another country. Except if you've done the Chinese trick. China wants to invest in higher education of all countries, especially countries like ours providing big higher education market, but doesn't want you to invest. So they've been better than us. They use the flexibility which Professor Mani was referring to. There is a flexibility that if you offer to become part of the most favored nation provision, then you have flexibility to say, we'll accept this and not accept that. Which is called in their language seeking exemption. India has sought no exemption under any provision. And China has sought umpteen exemption to such an extent, it essentially retains its full control over its higher education and all decision making in its hand, while we are going to lose all such options. Another provision, in some ways more dangerous than the most favored nation, and that is known as national treatment. We'll be very happy with something about our nation. We are going to get better treatment. That's why it's called national treatment. It's language. Linguists will tell you, Chomsky will tell you, our Indian linguists tell us all the time, whenever language becomes a tool of manipulation, then beautiful words are used. So what is national treatment? National treatment tells us that each government will have to ensure level playing field. 3 words. Level playing field. For whom? You'll probably think in a country of Babasaheb Ambedkar, level playing field means level playing field for Dalits, tribals, Muslims, OBCs. And also gender parity for women in each of these communities. No. Level playing field is to be ensured by our government then for corporate capital, for service providers. You cannot do anything which is to the detriment of any service provider. What does it mean? Imagine UGC makes a grant of 50 crores of rupees to Madras University to modernize its library system. National treatment says, if you provide 50 crore rupees grant to Madras University, you have to provide it to Microsoft University, which will be established, or Westinghouse University to be established, Suzuki University, and also to Jindal Universities of India, which are already there. Because giving 50 crore rupees grant favors Madras University over the private universities. It makes Madras, in front of Madras University, they will not be able to make as much profit. Therefore, you have to have a level playing field. UGC will say, under those circumstances, it won't remain there. We know UGC will be replaced by an independent regulatory authority, like it has been the case with privatization of electricity, telecommunication, water is already there. IRA is there. So IRA will replace, under GATT's agenda, the present UGC, Medical Council of India, Bar Council of India, All India Council of Technical Education, all will be replaced. So the IRA will tell us, the new IRA will tell us, since we cannot provide money to all the universities, government and private, therefore we will not provide any money to the government universities as well. Get out of the business of the trade of supporting the university system. Will not provide maintenance grant, will not provide salary grants. Under these conditions, all universities will naturally ask the state or the central government, how do we survive? They will be told, you survive by converting all your courses into self-financing courses. Charge enough fees to pay for all costs, including the cost of electricity when the class is being held, cost of air conditioning if you have, whatever is happening in classroom, the teacher teaching his or her, that part of the salary of teaching you for 2 hours, all the students should know we are paying the teacher for 2 hours. The entire cost will be charged from the students. What does it mean? There will be no government funded universities and colleges anymore in this country. IITs would have been privatized. IIMs are already on the way. All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences at Pondicherry and Chandigarh, all these will be privatized. Therefore, advanced action is being taken in privatizing IITs. You know, stories keep coming. This is being privatized, that is being privatized. An entire research function in sciences will be privatized. Who says that? Not in this case GATS. This is being stated by the Chintan Shivir of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh in his last meeting in Dehradun, UP. When the meeting ended, we all came to know through newspaper reports. The Chintan Shivir of RSS decided the institutions of CSIR and other scientific institutions now should learn to have projects in partnership with private corporations and not wait for any government funding, but government is too poor to provide funding. And I'm told by my colleagues in Chennai that already the process has started in various CSIR supported institutions in the city of Chennai itself. Already the process started. This year, 500 crore rupees which are allocated in the budget were actually not given. Last year, Last year the 500 crore rupees were allocated to keep you calm so you won't start shouting from the first day of the budget. So you will keep quiet, but it will not actually be given. And it was not given last year. Just a beginning. Just a beginning. Already 1/4 of the grant has not been given. Imagine how many years it will take to stop the entire grant and push you to accept the market agenda in research. And what kind of research market will promote and what kind it will not promote should be obvious to us. Obvious to us. Like when we went into the so-called Green Revolution in 1960s, at that time under Rockefeller and Ford Foundation pressures, because they were the representatives of the capital at that time, we were not allowed to undertake any research at that time in the area of drought-prone agriculture, rain-fed agriculture. Entire scene of rain-fed agriculture, which comprises almost 80% plus of Indian agricultural land, was ignored in scientific research and has been ignored since then. All research was focused upon 10% of the irrigated fields, because they did not want the rest of 80 or 90% of the rain-fed agriculture to start increasing their production by 1%, 2% or 5%, because that will do two things. A, it will not allow the dwarf variety of wheat or paddy to come into this country, the new genome to enter our country, and also it will eliminate poverty. Both agendas are not acceptable to global capital. The connections are all there to be seen by us. If you don't see it, it's our problem. I'm just reminded of Bob Dylan, the rebel guitar player of United States in 1960s, who almost enthused the entire young population along with Joan Baez and Pete Seeger to stand up against the Vietnam War. And Vietnam War had to be stopped. So in one of his famous songs he says, how many more deaths we will see in order to know the truth? And then he adds, the truth is blowing in the wind. My friends, see it, recognize it, catch hold of it. It's there. There's a provision called domestic regulation. What does it tell us, domestic regulation? Domestic regulation is not about that in domestic matters we can regulate. Just the opposite. You cannot make any policy, make any budget allocation, formulate any scheme or program without specific permission of Council of Trade and Services, which will be watching you all the time, watching all the nations, member nations. For this it has a mechanism called TPRM, Trade Policy Review Mechanism. They'll be keeping a watch on you. If anyone is violating the basic principles which are there in favor of market, then Council of Trade and Services will take punitive action. And punitive action will be not just merely financial penalty. It will be trade embargo. We are not Cuba that we can withstand 6 decades of trade embargo. Our economy will just fall apart. There will be no way of saying no. These penalties will have to be accepted. And I've already mentioned that our statutory bodies like UGC, Medical Council, Bar Council, National Council, Teacher Education, etc., they will all be replaced by independent regulatory authority. Why is the global market so keen to replace our statutory bodies by a new mechanism? Because independent regulatory authority will not be accountable to any of the constitutional mechanism and statutory bodies of India. It will not be accountable to the Parliament or to our legislative assemblies. Neither to Parliament nor to Vidhan Sabhas, nor to the elected members, elected people or the cabinet ministers. It will be accountable only to corporate capital and the market representatives. It will negotiate with them. This is what they are doing in electricity. They negotiate with Ambanis and not with Kejriwal. And Kejriwal doesn't know what to do with it, despite his long promise. They are negotiating with Ambanis and Tatas, who are the service providers of electricity. The people who have gotten the people's mandate will become powerless, and those without people's mandate, the corporate capital will have all the powers. Are we willing to see this kind of a deterioration in our country? It's an ideological deterioration. Will no more be We have, of course, we are not already part of the social welfare model that we lost probably in sometime in 1960. We forgot that India strived one day during freedom struggle to become a social welfare state. We are already not there. For last 4 decades we are facing the neoliberal capitalist attack. Are we willing to go to this, at this kind of a farcical situation where our parliament and Vidhan Sabhas will be powerless? Time is now to stop it, not later. When I talk about epistemic attack, I must not forget about referring to how this attack is made. Again, it is made in a very conceptual manner. Professor Ramanujam mentioned some of this. He read out that in one question there is a reference to strictly quantifiable outcomes. Let us start wondering, what is strictly quantifiable in education, what is not? This was preceded by World Bank declaration in 1990, in which World Bank very cleverly used the 3 UN agencies, and UN agencies were willing to be used by World Bank. In 1990, in his conference held in Thailand known as Jomtien Conference, the Jomtien Declaration says that henceforth in school education, only parameters which should be used for assessing and evaluating children should be observable and measurable. The new avatar of observable and measurable is strictly quantifiable outcomes. The new avatar of the same idea, coming from the same market forces. Now what is observable and what is quantifiable? I have already mentioned. The historic consciousness about 1857 struggle, or the consciousness about the agenda, which socialist agenda which Bhagat Singh was fighting for, is not observable, not measurable. It is not strictly quantifiable. None of it is. Scientific temper is not quantifiable, nor it is observable and measurable. Empathy for the downtrodden and oppressed is not quantifiable, it's not observable and measurable. What is observable and measurable and quantifiable are only mechanical outputs of education system, not the cognitive, knowledge-based outputs, and not the outputs of consciousness. If this is not what education is going to do, what is education for? I want to read here the report, excerpt on higher education from the report of Kothari Commission. I chose to read from Kothari Commission because it's the last report of the social welfare state of 1966. A state which was not actually a social welfare state, but at least it was claiming to or attempting to be social welfare state. At the last report of that era, bygone era, and please listen to it, very powerful formulation of what should be higher education for. Kothari Commission writes in 1966, universities, something Professor Ramanujam already mentioned along those lines. Universities are essentially a community of teachers and students. Therefore, academic community idea is going to be erased from new education policy. Universities are essentially a community of teachers and students where in some way all learn from one another. The idea totally alien to market economy, learning from one another. At any rate, strive to do so. Their principal object is to deepen man's understanding of the universe and of himself in body, mind and spirit. To disseminate this understanding throughout society and to apply it in the service of mankind. They are the dwelling places, very important phrase. They are the dwelling places of ideas and idealism. Fortunately, it still strives in many university campuses of our country. It strives in the Periyar Study Circle, Ambedkar Periyar Study Circle here itself, in IIT Madras. It strives in JNU and DU. It strives in Sambalpur University where students are fighting for their rights. It strives all over India in the student community despite neoliberal attack. We should continue to have faith in our youth. So, Kothari Commission said they are the dwelling places of ideas and idealism. Theirs is a pursuit of truth and excellence in all its diversity, not in uniformity. Please mark, in all its diversity. Kothari Commission already dismissing the entire framework of new education policy of the present government. In all its diversity, a pursuit which needs above all courage and fearlessness to say whether it's Lingdo recommendation or it is GATS recommendation that you shall not hold any demonstration in university campus, you will not participate in student organization or any political formation. Our students will get up and say, you can go to hell, lump it, we are going to organize our demonstration, democratic consciousness is our goal, and we'll continue to coin slogans against GATS and WTO even if you have a dictum against us. This is a pursuit of truth and excellence, a pursuit which needs above all courage and fearlessness. And then Kothari Commission adds, great universities and timid people go ill together. Beautiful. It doesn't stop. It tells us the purpose of higher education. Universities must learn to strive to serve as the conscience of the nation. Universities are the conscience of the nation, whom you cannot trivialize. You cannot privatize the conscience of the nation. You cannot hand over the conscience of the nation neither to Ambani's and Tata's nor to Suzuki's and Westinghouse. It's the conscience of the nation. They are the assessors of the national way of life. Very, very, very applicable to what is happening to us. Who will tell us that something is going wrong in our national life? Who will call the spade a spade and say our ancient tradition of tolerance is being replaced by intolerance? Our ancient tradition of diversity of faith, diversity of thoughts is being replaced because we are the people where Charvaka also existed. The materialist thought system was in India, not in America. And the critical consciousness is as old as Gautam Buddha. As old as that. Fight against inequality did not start in America or Europe. It started in the time of Gautam Buddha. So it is our way of life which is at stake now. Therefore, as assessors of the national way of life, and there is a danger of losing our bearings unless universities are able to play this role adequately by involving themselves, now for the universities, by involving themselves deeply in the study and evaluation of the social process. Such involvement is vital since the universities are preeminently the forum for critical assessment of society, sympathetic, objective, unafraid. This is the goal of higher education, not to generate profit, but do something for our society and country. What do we do? I want to conclude. What do we do? How do we fight back? What should be our ways of redeeming our education system? We must learn that what existed previously from school to colleges and universities is not necessarily to be preserved and conserved. There is a danger in being romantic about what existed. What existed has not helped us to become a democratic society. I will share with you data. Out of every 100 children who begin their study in class 1, only 17 out of them, that's 17% in all sections of society, all data, are able to cross class 12. Why is crossing class 12 is crucial? Not crossing class 8 as Right to Education Act says. Whether you detain them or don't detain them, you are only going to get education up to class 8. Why it is important? Because only by crossing class 12, our children have access to higher education, which means mobility, social mobility from the previous oppressed and poor homestead. Now they can move out and see the liberation coming to them. That's why class 12 is the minimum we can talk about. What happens if we look at the caste-wise data? Only 6% of tribals are able to cross class 12. Only 6 out of 100. Only 8% of Dalits cross class 12. Only 9% of Muslims cross class 12. And only 10% of OBCs cross class 12. Which means that 90% more of the and women being excluded will be much more than the men that we know. This means that 90% or more of the backward castes and classes have been excluded from higher education of all kinds, even from polytechnics, forget about IITs. This also means, more importantly, more than 90% of the backward castes and classes have never had access to any advantages or benefits or reservation. They've been excluded from social justice agenda also. A very important fact, especially for the middle classes of our country, belonging to the upper caste and upper classes, at least being more aligned with upper caste and classes than with the oppressed sections of society, to remind them and to include them in our struggle by saying that reservation cannot be against you, because only a handful of our Dalits, tribals and OBCs have benefited from it. And amazingly, there is not a single political party, not even the political parties representing Dalits and tribals and OBCs, which even talk about this hard reality of India. This must change. There should be a major transformation. I don't have time to describe about what other transformation required. Of course, moving towards a common education system from KG to PG, fully state funded and governed in a democratic, participative and decentralized mode. Just governed in that mode. So there is a sense on being autonomy. Autonomy not for privatization and for making profit. Autonomy for deciding how to enrich our curriculum, our pedagogy, and how to bring in equitable access for all sections of society. This principle is enough to guide us what kind of transformation we are talking about. Therefore, when we talk of the public funded education to be preserved and taken forward, it is not preservation of the old format, of the old framework. That has to be destroyed. I was reading Periyar this morning for the nth time, and this book talked about his creative destruction, principle of creative destruction in order to build a self-respecting society. Creative destruction is crucial to understanding how to build a new public funded education system. We have to creatively destroy all what was wrong so far. Whether it was Macaulayan ideas, whether it was very inferior understanding of what is good knowledge, what is transformative knowledge. Knowledge is not for status quo being maintained or reinforcing the status quo. Knowledge must be transforming. And we can go on talking about it. So, transformative agenda of education is what we are talking about. It's only by transforming public funded education system that we can hope to maintain it as an instrument of empowerment for all sections of society and building a better India. Not by just going on with what was being done for last 6 decades. It has to be transformed. And we have to build a transformative agenda of public funded education system. This will take another seminar. And I think this is the point where Professor Ramananda was also concluding. We have to build a transformative agenda of education. If it requires 3 days of seminar or 5 days of workshop, let us be ready for it, because it's our battle, not their battle. I would also say, the moment you think of transformative agenda of public funded education, then you are not fighting against the global market forces in their battleground. But then the battle is very difficult. It's in their favor already, because it's their battleground designed by them. The strategy must be to open our own battleground and ask them to come into our battleground to fight with us. Reverse the battle. And you can do it only when your own alternative vision of transformative public funded education. Let's do that. That is the way to stop cats. I conclude by recalling Dr. Ambedkar, who gave this scintillating slogan in early 1930s: educate, agitate and organize. And today, with the level of neoliberal attack we are facing in our country, we have to transcend that 3-point slogan, take it forward and add to it, let us educate, struggle and organize in order to redeem all our languages from the imperialist attack, in order to ensure equality and social justice as a very, very principle on which education has to be built. Let us ensure that all sections of society have equitable access with dignity to all branches of knowledge in our education system, and let us let us ensure that while doing this, we'll be reconstructing our public funded education system and retaining our sovereignty guaranteed by our constitution. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Professor Anil Sadgopal, for giving such an enlightenment about GATS and its implication. Now, it's a time to invite Comrade M.A. Baby, former Education Minister of Kerala, to please come over to the dais and offer a few words of felicitation. Comrade M.A. Baby on the stage. We request Professor Ramanujam to kindly give us a brief note in Tamil, the speech of Professor Anil Sadgopal. We request Professor Ramanujam. Actually, we did not request. He had actually volunteered. We thank him for that.
மிக சுருக்கமாக அவர் சொன்ன பல கருத்துக்களிலிருந்து just be brief and mention some points. ஸோ முதல்ல அவர் சொன்னது ஆரம்பித்தது ஒரு நம்பிக்கையுடன் நாம் தொடங்க வேண்டும் என்பது. இன்றைக்கு நிறைய இளைஞர்கள் நம்முடைய பல்கலைக்கழகங்களில் சிந்திக்க ஆரம்பித்திருக்கிறார்கள். அந்த சிந்தனையை நாம் வரவேற்க வேண்டும். அதில் தான் நம்முடைய நம்பிக்கை இருப்பது என்று சொன்னார். அவருடைய வாழ்க்கையிலிருந்து ஒரு அனுபவம் சொன்னார். 2005 தான் நமக்கு தெரிஞ்சு இந்த உயர்கல்விங்கிறது WTOவில் தாரை வார்த்தை கொடுக்கறதுக்கான முயற்சிகள் ஆரம்பிச்சது. ஆனால் அதற்கு முன்னாலே 1998 அவர் டெல்லி பல்கலைக்கழகத்தில் இருக்கும் பொழுது மேற்கு ஆஸ்திரேலியாவிலிருந்து ஒரு சிலர் வந்திருந்தாங்க. வந்து கேட்டாங்க, என்ன கேட்டாங்கன்னா, நீங்கள் வந்து உங்களுடைய டிகிரிலாம் கொடுக்க வேண்டாம், நான் எங்களோட டிகிரி கொடுக்கலாம். எதுக்காகன்னு கேட்டால், ஆஸ்திரேலியா டிகிரி கொடுக்கணும்னு சொன்னால் நீங்கள் வந்து நிறைய ஃபீஸ் சார்ஜ் பண்ண முடியும். அந்த ஃபீஸ் நிறைய கிடைக்கும் பொழுது உங்களுக்கு நிறைய லாபம் கிடைக்கும். அந்த லாபத்திலிருந்து ஒரு பங்கு ஆஸ்திரேலியாவுக்கு நாங்கள் எடுத்துகிட்டு போவோம். ஆனால் பாக்கி பங்கை வச்சுட்டு உங்களுக்கு நிறைய சம்பளம் கிடைக்கும், நிறைய வசதிகள்லாம் கிடைக்கும் என்று சொன்னார். அப்போது அவர் சொல்வது என்னன்னு சொன்னால், இது போன்ற அரசாங்கத்துடைய முயற்சிகள் பின்னால் வந்தாலும் அதற்கான ப்ராசஸ் செயல்பாடுகள் என்பதெல்லாம் அதற்கு முன்னாலேயே நடந்துட்டு தான் இருந்தது. அதே போல தான் இன்றைக்கும் இந்த கேட்ஸ் விஷயங்கள் எல்லாம் அரசாங்க அளவில் இன்றைக்கு முன் வந்தாலும் இதற்கான முயற்சிகள் கள ரீதியான இதற்கான செயல்பாடுகள் என்று தொடர்ந்து நடந்து கொண்டே தான் இருக்கிறது. இன்னொன்று, நாளைக்கு வரப்போது பற்றி சிந்திக்கணும் என்றாலும் இன்றைக்கு களத்தில் நடப்பதை பற்றி நாம் சிந்திக்க வேண்டும். அது வந்து அரசாங்கத்திற்கும் கொள்கைக்கும் வருவதற்கு முன்னாலேயே நாம் இதை பற்றி சிந்திக்க வேண்டும் என்று சொன்னார். கேட்ஸை பற்றி சொல்லும் பொழுது, ஜெனரல் அக்ரிமெண்ட் ஆன் ட்ரேட் அண்ட் சர்வீசஸ், அதுடைய முக்கியமான ஒரு பிரச்சனையாக சொல்வது, கல்வி என்பது ஒரு சேவையாக, சந்தையில் விற்கப்படும் ஒரு சேவையாக கொண்டு வரப்படுகிறது. இது வந்து மிக அடிப்படையான ஒன்று, நாம் எதிர்க்க வேண்டிய ஒன்று. ஏனென்றால் கல்வி என்பதை நாம் ஒரு உரிமை என்று பார்க்கிறோம். உரிமை என்று நினைக்கும் கல்வியை வர்த்தக பொருளாக, சந்தையில் வர்த்தகம் செய்யும் ஒரு பொருளாக பயன்படுத்துவதை நாம் அனுமதிக்க முடியாது. இவங்க சொல்லியிருக்கிற இந்த பட்டியலில் கல்வி என்பது நைட் கிளப்ஸ், பியர் பப்ஸ், அதெல்லாம் அதோட சேர்ந்து வருது அப்படிங்கிறதையும் சொன்னார். இதுல மாணவர்களை ஒரு கன்சியூமர்ஸாகத்தான் பார்க்கிறாங்க. நுகர்வோராக பார்க்கும் பொழுது கல்வி என்பது ஒரு வர்த்தக பொருள், மாணவர் என்பது நுகர்வோர். அப்போ நுகர்வோர் தாம் பயன்படுத்துவதற்கு தகுந்தாற் போல அதற்கான கட்டணத்தை செலுத்துவது, யூசர் பேஸ் பாலிசின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. இதை தான் முக்கியமாக கொண்டு வருதான் இந்த அஜெண்டாவில் அடிப்படையாக அவர் சொன்னார். இது ஏன் நாம் இதை பற்றி நாம் மிகவும் கவலைப்பட வேண்டும்? 1999 அன்றைக்கு வாஜ்பாய் அரசாங்கம் இருந்த காலத்திலிருந்தே பாரிஸில் சொன்னதை பற்றி ஒரு மேற்கோளாக சொன்னார். என்னவென்று சொன்னால், உயர்கல்வியில் இருக்கக்கூடிய அதிலிருந்து கிடைக்கக்கூடிய நலன் என்பது ஒவ்வொரு மாணவருக்கும் தனிமனிதராக கிடைக்கிறது. அதனால் இதுல எந்த சமூகத்திற்கோ நம்முடைய நாட்டிற்கோ இதனால கிடைக்கும் பலன் எதுவும் கிடையாது. நீங்க படிச்சா நீங்க வேலைக்கு போறீங்க, அப்போ உங்களுக்கு மட்டும்தான் கிடைக்கக்கூடிய பலன் என்பதால் நீங்க தான் இதுக்கு காசு கொடுக்கணும், இதற்காக அரசாங்கம் செலவு செய்ய வேண்டிய அவசியம் இல்லை என்று. அப்போ இன்றைக்கு பேசப்படுவதற்குரிய அடிப்படை 1999 அவர் சொல்றார். அதுவும் அரசாங்கத்துல ஒரு யூனியன் மினிஸ்டராலேயே சொல்லப்பட்டது, உயர்கல்விக்கு அரசாங்கத்துடைய கவர்மெண்டுடைய செலவீடு என்பது தேவையே இல்லை என்பது. அதற்கு பிறகு பிர்லா அம்பானி ரிப்போர்ட்டிலிருந்து பல விஷயங்கள் சொன்னார். மிக முக்கியமாக அவங்க என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னு சொன்னா, நீங்க அடிப்படை கல்வி பள்ளி கல்விக்கு வேணும்னா அரசாங்கத்துடைய செலவீடு இருக்கலாம், ஆனால் உயர்கல்விக்கு தேவையே இல்லை. சந்தை இங்கே உள்ளே வர தயாராக இருக்கிறது, பங்கேற்க தயாராக இருக்கிறது. நீங்க உயர்கல்வியை முழுக்க முழுக்க சந்தையிடம் ஒப்படைத்து விட வேண்டும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லும்போது அவர் சொன்னார், நம்ம சிந்திச்சு பார்க்கணும். அப்போ சந்தை என்று வந்தால் அவர்கள் எந்த மாதிரியான கல்விக்கு முக்கியத்துவம் தருவார்கள்? அவர்கள் அறிவியல் மனப்பான்மைக்கு, அறிவியல் கண்ணோட்டத்திற்கு, வரலாற்று உணர்விற்கு, இதற்காக யாரும் முக்கியத்துவம் கொடுக்க போறாங்க? அப்போ சந்தை நடத்தும் கல்வி என்பது எத்தகையதாக அமையும்? இது ஒரு மீண்டும் நம் நாட்டில் பிளவுபட்டிருக்கும் சமூகத்தில், ஜாதி ரீதியாக பிளவுபட்ட சமூகத்தில் ஒரு புதிய உயர் ஜாதி கீழ் ஜாதியை உருவாக்குவதற்கான முயற்சி என்பதை மிக தெளிவாக குறிப்பிட்டார். இன்னொன்று அவர் சொன்ன ஒரு பாயிண்ட் என்னன்னு சொன்னா, சந்தை உள்ளே வரும் பொழுது, இந்த கேட்ஸ் ஒப்பந்தத்தில் நீங்க உள்ள போகும் பொழுது ஒரு லெவல் பிளேயிங் ஃபீல்ட் அப்படின்னு சொன்னார், அதை நீங்க உருவாக்கணும். இது யாருக்காக? என்றைக்கும் சந்தைக்கு தேவையான முயற்சிகள் எது இருந்தாலும் வரவேற்கப்படும், அதை எதிர்க்கக்கூடிய எது இருந்தாலும் அது நிராகரிக்கப்படும், நிராகரிக்கப்பட வேண்டும். இதுல உங்களுக்கு எந்த விதமான சாய்ஸும் கிடையாது. நீங்க ஒப்பந்தத்தில் கையெழுத்திட்ட பிறகு எந்த நாட்டிலிருந்து வேண்டுமானாலும் அவர்கள் கல்வியில் உள்ளே வரலாம், நீங்க யாரும் வரலாம் கூடாது என்று நிர்ணயிக்க முடியாது. அதே போல நாட்டிற்குள்ள பல்கலைக்கழகங்கள் செய்யும் அன்றாட பிராக்டிசஸ்ல கூட இந்த சந்தைக்கு எதிராக முயற்சிகள் எடுத்தால் அது ரெகுலேட்டரி அத்தாரிட்டியிலிருந்து வருவாங்க, மேலிருந்து இதை தடை செய்வதற்கான எல்லா ஏற்பாடுகளும் இருக்கும். ஸோ அவர் முக்கியமாக சொன்ன பாயிண்ட் இங்க என்னன்னு சொன்னா, கையெழுத்திட்ட பிறகு நம்முடைய இதில் தலையிடும் சுதந்திரம் முழுக்க முழுக்க பறிக்கப்படும் என்பது. இதுடைய பல சில அம்சங்கள் சொல்லலாம். ஒண்ணு, சந்தை உள்ளே வரும் பொழுது எந்த விதமான கல்வி விளைவுகளை எதிர்பார்ப்பார்கள் அப்படின்னு சொல்லும் பொழுது மெஷரபிள் அவுட்கம்ஸ் அப்படின்னு சொன்னாங்க. அப்சர்வபிள் அண்ட் மெஷரபிள் சொல்லிட்டு இருந்தாங்க, இன்னைக்கு ஸ்ட்ரிக்ட்லி குவான்டிஃபையபிள் சொல்றாங்க. அப்போ கல்வியில் தேர்ச்சி நிலை என்பதை, ஒருவர் கல்வி பெற்றவர் என்பதை நீங்க முழுக்க முழுக்க இது போன்ற பாயிண்ட்ஸ், இந்த மாதிரி குவான்டிட்டிஸா கொண்டு வரும் பொழுது மீண்டும் சொல்லலாம், எப்படி வரலாற்று உணர்வோ சமூக உணர்வோ சமூகத்திற்காக பாடுபடும் நினைவு இதெல்லாம் எங்கேருந்து வரும்? இதை நம்ம நினைச்சு பார்க்கணும்னு சொன்னார். இதை பற்றி பேசும்பொழுது கொத்தாரி கமிஷனுடைய அறிக்கையிலிருந்து ஒரு முக்கியமான ஒரு வரியை குறிப்பிட்டார். ஒரு பல்கலைக்கழகம் என்பது மாணவர்களும் ஆசிரியர்களும் சேர்ந்து ஒரு கல்வி சமூகமாக இயங்க வேண்டும், உண்மையை தேடும் ஒரு சமூகமாக இருக்க வேண்டும். இது அப்படிப்பட்ட ஒரு நல்ல ஒரு பல்கலைக்கழகமும் ஒரு கோழைத்தனமும் சேர்ந்து இருக்க முடியாது. இது பல்கலைக்கழகம் என்பது மக்களின் மனச்சாட்சியாக இயங்க வேண்டும் என்று சொன்னார். அப்படி மனச்சாட்சியாக சந்தை நடத்தும் பல்கலைக்கழகம் இயங்குமா என்பதை நாம் நிச்சயமாக கேள்விக்கு எழுப்ப வேண்டும். இறுதியில் இப்படி இருந்தால் இதை எவ்வாறு நாம் எதிர்கொள்வது என்று பார்க்கும் பொழுது, இன்றைக்கு இருக்கக்கூடிய நம்மிடம் உள்ள கல்வி முறையை மாற்ற வேண்டும் என்பதில் ஐயமே இருக்கக்கூடாது. இன்று நம்மிடம் நம்முடைய கல்வி முறை என்பது 117 பேர் தான் உள்ள வருவது. பெரும்பாலும் பங்கேற்பு மிக மிக குறைவானது. அதுவும் தலித்துகள், முஸ்லிம்கள், பெண்கள் என்று பலவிதமான சமூக பிரச்சனைகளை பிரதிபலிக்கக்கூடிய ஒன்றாக இயங்குகிறது. இதை மாற்ற வேண்டும் என்பதில் ஐயப்பாடே கிடையாது. ஆனால் எத்தகைய மாற்றம் என்பதுதான். அதை இந்த சூழ்நிலையில் இந்த கேட்ஸ் ஒப்பந்தம் மூலமாக இதை முழுக்க முழுக்க சந்தைக்கு கொடுப்பதை நாம் எதிர்த்தாக வேண்டும். புதிய ஒரு கல்வி முறையை உருவாக்க வேண்டும். சமமான ஜனநாயக முறையை அமல்படுத்தும் ஒரு கல்வி முறையை உருவாக்க வேண்டும். அதற்கான ஒரு புதிய ஒரு கண்ணோட்டத்தை நாம் உருவாக்க வேண்டும். அம்பேத்கருடைய ஸ்லோகன்ஸ் சொல்லலாம், அதோடு சேர்ந்து முடித்தார். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.